This may sound like a sports conversation at the beginning, but it won't last that way very long. Welcome into My State of Mind. I am Dan York, and I'm pleased to have you. You know, on Fridays, we kind of chill on the rundown, meaning we don't necessarily try to grab all the issues of the day, but we do try to, you know, bang out some meaningful conversation depending on what's going on. And I had on my Tuesday program Ricardo Pitts-Wiley from the Mixed Magic Theater in Pawtucket on to talk about Ferguson and the one-year anniversary. But the truth of the matter is I had invited him in to talk about this subject. So when Ferguson kind of, you know, reignited a little bit over the weekend, we talked about that, and I postponed my conversation for my original reason for inviting him in until tonight. Does that make any sense to you? Well, the point of the matter is that process is always something I need to get through. But I think you'll understand when we go and get this thing done. Let me play Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, needs no introduction, and his really upset mindset when the NFL kept the 4-game suspension on Tom Brady.
I want to apologize to the fans of the New England Patriots and Tom Brady. I was wrong to put my faith in the league.
Very, very upset, right? And so then I read this column a couple of weeks back, made a comment about it here, and talked about it on WPRO on the radio, where you can hear me weekdays noon to 3, and I got a boatload of reaction from folks on it. A guy by the name of Jason Whitlock wrote a piece under the headline, Patriots, Tom Brady, and Robert Kraft get a taste of the justice system. And I opined about that a little bit, and then I got this Facebook post from my guest reminding me that I'm overdue to have him in anyway. And he writes, after the Duke lacrosse scandal, whoops, where are we? Can we go back to that Facebook post? Thank you. After the Duke lacrosse scandal, one of the vindicated players pointed out that during the trial, he came to realize that without the resources his family had, he'd been in the same situation poor people and people of color find themselves in when dealing with a justice system they've never been able to trust. Bob Kraft and Tom Brady now know what it feels like to be poor and black. Same theme that Jason Whitlock from ESPN.com and a nationally syndicated writer was going on. And Ricardo Pitts-Wiley from the Mixed Magic Theater is my guest to talk about it. I'm glad you posted. It was good to hear from you. So this is not really a sports conversation. I guess the way I would position to get your reaction is Bob Kraft and Tom Brady. And by the way, we recorded this program on Tuesday of this week. So there could be even more developments of settlement coming up right until Friday. So that stuff is interesting but not meaningful to this conversation, because up until Tuesday of this week, we had an owner and a quarterback who feel like they've really been hammered by the system that they operate in the NFL. And you think it's a learning lesson.
It is a learning lesson, but let's also make sure we separate out the system of the NFL and the justice system. They're not the same thing.
Correct.
Even though what happens in both of them can have an impact on certain people. And so Robert Kraft and Bob and Tom Brady, and for full disclosure, I'm a Patriots fan. I'm a Tom Brady fan. He went to Michigan. I'm a Michigan fan. I wish he had gone to the White House. But that aside, what they came to realize is if you can build up with language and circumstance a case against somebody because for whatever reason you think they've been cheating or they've gotten away with something or you just don't like them, you can do it. And you have to defend yourself against allegations that in some ways you have no proof of your innocence and they have no proof of your guilt, but you may have to pay for it anyway. And if you're an African American or a poor person in this country dealing with the justice system, you deal with the same thing all the time. You don't necessarily, you just have to get somebody in this situation. We want you to plea bargain out, even if you haven't done anything. We're telling you that to plea bargain out is a better way to go than to to face a trial which you can't afford, you know, and a public disposition, or even a judicial disposition that is not going to be in your favor.
I find this fascinating. There's a couple of things. So we're talking about a football, right? We're talking about a football and a series, you know, a dozen footballs that were inflated or deflated, and all of that going on. Look, I think there's enough facts in that story to indicate that Tom Brady was even vaguely aware that there was a discrepancy and the footballs were out of protocol. I think for Tom Brady and for the benefit of the organization, having settled early on would have been the right thing to do, not because he was unable to defend himself, but because there was enough there and for everyone's best interest to move on. Now the thing has become a fiasco beyond whatever. So I'm not sure that the story is exactly common ground to those who feel like they've been beat up in the criminal justice system. However, what I found to be fascinating, just on an aesthetic point of view, is how horrified Bob Kraft was that his system that he's so familiar and that he has had such a part in building turned on him. Turned on him,
but imagine what if you're one of those people who the freedom whatever the campaign that helps get people out of exonerated for crimes they didn't commit over a long period of time. You know, people have spent 20 years in jail. Here's a system that was supposed to work for them too, and it didn't work. And only they didn't lose 4 games and $1 million and some draft picks that don't really matter anyway because most of them failed anyway. But they spent 20 years in jail. Now, in this case, we're talking about deflated footballs in a type. I played football, you know. I wanted things a certain way too, you know. And I was a running back. I wasn't even a quarterback, you know. But I wanted the ball right here. I didn't want it down here. I didn't want it over here. I wanted it right here. Well, Tom Brady and every quarterback in the game wants the ball a certain way. How in the world are we spending millions and millions of dollars talking about deflated footballs and no real evidence, but just popular opinion? You know, it's something that you can count on. Remember the Charles Stewart case in Boston? He shot his pregnant wife in a black neighborhood, accused a black man of doing it, you know, and they threw a dragnet over the whole city.
Right, I do remember.
You know, and you know his wife died, the baby died. He hooked up with his girlfriend, bought a bar, and then the story started to unravel. But what happened? What didn't happen was, see, I was victimized by that. I was in Boston during that time, shooting the movie with Loretta Swit. I couldn't go for a walk because the producers didn't want me to get picked up because I fit the profile. Now,
physically,
I was a black man. That was it. You know, so I might have been guilty. Now we're looking at spending millions of dollars about an equipment violation that has much more to do with a power struggle that doesn't really benefit anybody, but we're at the same time we're sending people to jail on mandatory sentencing guidelines, you know, for 5 to 15 years, and we're talking about justice. You see, sports is a mirror of our society. What you can do with a lot of money against somebody with also a lot of money, you can do in other parts of the system too. The lesson here is, oh, you thought it couldn't happen to you. Yes, it can.
All right, when we come back, I'll offer an example that I experienced, which I felt common ground with Bob Kraft, and maybe those who feel like the system is unfair. Stay with us. You know, it's funny, I listen to sports talk radio a lot because I'm nothing but a dumb jock myself, you know, and I find the whole Brady Deflategate, everything's a gate since Nixon, right? The Deflategate thing to be fascinating in a context, but what I find frustrating is that the whole thing is argued inside a sports and NFL bubble. Yeah. And so when Jason Whitlock, the African-American journalist, sports journalist, said, hey, by the way, fellas, welcome to the justice system. In fact, he wrote this. He wrote, self-awareness is optional for the rich and famous. They spend little time in America's reality. That's why Kraft and Brady have reacted to Deflategate like poor people caught up in America's drug war, prison for profit industry, mass incarceration policy, mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines, and a criminal justice system exploited by public officials using the vulnerable to advance their careers.
Yes.
Right or wrong, when Kraft said, I put my faith, I was wrong to put my faith in the league, right or wrong, that's how the kids in the streets of Baltimore and Ferguson feel about our system of justice.
Yes.
There are those who will say, oh, for God's sake. But I will tell you, a short story before you get on one of your eloquent rants here. I got caught for a speeding ticket a handful of years ago. It was literally 40 and a 35. And when I went to use my good driving record in front of the judge, but I wanted to defend my case, and I'm not going to name the city, I've talked about it on the radio in the past, the officer told a story. Obviously some kind of Dan York problem was going on. The officer told a story that was absolutely so completely false that I literally was shaking with rage and feeling violated. And I went through the exercise and I was able to appeal, and I went to the traffic tribunal and I got the whole thing figured out. But for the first time in my life, I really felt the chill of the system falsely accusing and coming down on me, and it shook me to a core. So when Bob Kraft has been going through this whole, the NFL has turned on me, and then Whitlock wrote what he wrote, I went, bingo, it's true.
It can't
It's
happen.
true. And I don't wish anyone to feel like they got burnt by a system of justice, but getting a taste of it is certainly an opportunity for common ground with some of the social problems we have in this country today.
You know, one of the things
Do I get accused of being a bleeding heart liberal when I say that? I don't know, but
well,
you know what I'm saying?
I do, and I may be a bleeding heart liberal, even though I'm not sure my heart is bleeding as much as it once did.
No, but you have perspective, and we've talked about in our last, I mean, I can't walk in your black man's shoes, you can't walk in my white man's shoes, but man, there's a lot more common ground than people want to admit.
I have in my show Reflections, Growing Up a Black Man in America, I have a poem called "When You're Black and You Know It, You Know What You Do. You know what to do. When you're black and you don't know it is when you have the most trouble." And that's the common ground we're talking about, of thinking that things are supposed to work for us, and when they don't work for us, we are totally bedazzled. You are totally bedazzled. I look at it and say, you know what?
Guess
I'm
what?
not surprised.
Welcome. Welcome to
my world.
And that's. I wonder if and when this thing finally resolves in the NFL and they settle or they don't or whatever, whether Bob Kraft and Tom Brady, more Bob Kraft than Tom Brady, will work to think about what Jason Whitlock wrote. But don't tell me they haven't heard it, they didn't read it. They've read it, and say, you know what? Now it's time to start thinking about a broader conversation about how people can get caught up and hurt.
But you see, this is where I disagree with Whitlock. Had Tom Brady and Bob Kraft in the NFL settled, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. Sometimes you got to take it all the way to the bitter end before you can have a reasonable conversation, because otherwise it would have been, well, Tom Brady's a cheater, they already believe he's a cheater, and these are rich people playing with rich people dollars, and at the end of the day he goes home to his beautiful model wife, and Bob Kraft goes home to his palatial estate. I mean, okay, so who's really harmed by this? Sometimes you have to take these things to the nth degree before you can really look at it and say, okay, you thought it couldn't happen to you. It happens to me every day on some level. But also, it's the teachable lesson for me, particularly when I'm dealing with young people, and is you need to look at the language that's being used here. You need to look at how you can be shaped, framed, railroaded, misrepresented, by language. Language is a very powerful thing. A language that says, I need you on my side in this. You don't know all the facts and everything. I just need you on my side. You know, or the other language that says, you know, but I haven't, I haven't done anything wrong and you can't prove it. Well, you sound like a liar. Which is not, different from somebody looking at me saying, well, you look guilty. You look dangerous. You look like you should be in jail. You look, what's the difference, Tom? I mean, so some people who want to believe you are guilty. When I wrote about the lacrosse kids, one of the things my son wrote about, my son Jonathan, who's actually the artistic director of our company, when he was at Yale, he wrote an article that said, is it possible that these kids at Duke can't get a fair trial because we hate them? Not just culturally we hate a privileged, entitled, got everything kid who did something that they should have been charged for underage drinking and bringing a hooker into or exotic dancer into their world, into the campus and community. That might have been the crime that they committed, but is it possible that we dislike them so much that we look at it as society? You know how many professors and so on came out against those kids and said, this is a culture that's been going on for the last 40 years, and these kids have been getting away with murder for years. And the city of Durham saying to their prosecutor, saying, hey, look, Duke University and these kids have been getting away with murder in our community for years, and we got a chance to bring some of them down. We're going to do it. So those kids, on some level, had no chance, but they had enough money. And the case didn't hold up. And the case did, but the vitriol that came from the community at them, and those kids are affected now. Before I came on the program, I went and looked them all up. What happened to them? And most of them got pretty good jobs, but that's a scar that's going to be with them for the rest of their lives.
And their coach ends up here in Rhode Island at Bryant. Only one school would ever offer him a gig.
But I'm a man who believes in second chances. And Presser is a good coach, and he deserves a chance to work again. But Presser also needs to acknowledge that he presided over a culture of privilege and entitlement and abuse that may have produced champions, but it also produced a lot of bad feelings, and that's just a reality. So those kids, but one of the kids, the last thing that came out of Pandora's box. You know what the last thing was? Hope. One of the kids said, you know what? I learned a lesson from this. I had resources. I had an opportunity to fight this thing. But I learned that people who don't have resources and things like that, I will always learn from this. This is what I learned from this, that if you don't have resources, you could get railroaded into hell. And I remember watching the kid on the newscast and saying, you know what? This kid's going to be all right. There's the hope, because he learned. The other two kids, I wasn't feeling that so much about. But that one, I said, okay, there's hope here. And maybe what Whitlock was writing was saying, at the end of this, maybe we can use our sports and things like that to look at a deeper problem in our culture that says, certain systems don't work for everybody, and sometimes the system works against you.
Well, what'll be interesting, we'll talk about when we come back, is whether Bob Kraft will address that, or just let this thing run its course with no broad perspective. Stay with us. So there's Bob Kraft on the day that he was very upset. And, I just think it's a fascinating conversation. By the way, please don't reduce your reaction to this as me being the typical Giant fan that's trying to, have some fun with the Patriots. I have said, I have all along, if you've been watching the show and listening to the radio show, I've said that it would be smart for Tom Brady to have settled early on, simply because I do believe, based on my reading of the facts, that there's a little bit of culpability, and we got an NFL system that's way out of whack, and there's a protection of there's all sorts of, as my guest has said, there's a big money power struggle going on here with this story, which is way past footballs, and I can promise you that there always is. So that aside, whether he should have settled or whether he doesn't and all of that, I wonder if Bob Kraft will ever share the emotion of him feeling like this system of the NFL came back to bite him, whether he's had a hand in building it or not, and he certainly has because he's such a pivotal. Don't you think that'd be a great conversation that would broaden out the scope of a football problem?
You know, I think I'd probably want to have the conversation with Tom Brady more than Bob Kraft.
Really?
I do, because I think Bob Kraft has.
Well, Kraft has been the one that's been the most free with his reaction to it.
He has spoken in certain ways, and you know, I think he truly believes that the system will work for him in some regard. You know, but you know, there's also, you know, we in America we love to build people up, but we love even more bringing them down. And Tom Brady had been built up to be the face of the NFL. I mean, the All-American boy, all blah blah blah. But you know, at some point, Tom, if you know, what we're facing here is the parallel between, okay, I want the footballs a certain way, and whoever did it, you know, I'm not telling you to do it, but if you do it, you know how I want the balls. All right, that's a $2,500 equipment violation, but now it's the same thing as, now, if I have 2 rocks of cocaine, of crack cocaine, I get 15 years in jail. But if I got an ounce of powder cocaine, and if I'm white especially, I get probation. Well, you know, how did we get from here to here? Well, how do we get from a $2,500 equipment violation, or $25,000 equipment violation, to where we are now? How do we get from here to here? Well, now you understand why there's people sitting in jail, you know, who all they had was a certain kind of thing, and they got 15 years to life. Well, what they're saying to you is a $25,000 equipment violation is now taking you to the point where for the rest of your life, you're going to be thought of as a person who cheated. That's part of your punishment for this. And you know what? It doesn't even matter. You know, because you look at the things, you go, well, you know, they reviewed the footballs at halftime of the Baltimore game. And there's another thing. Tom hurt himself, and he didn't take any accountability for this. After the Baltimore game, when they pulled the trickeration, followed the rules, but they just were smarter than John Harbaugh and the Baltimore Ravens. They put in a play that gave them an advantage, you know, smart play, and they won. Tom said in the post show, well, maybe he should read the rule book. I can remember sitting in front of the TV saying, boy, you're going to pay for that. And everything that's happening now is related to him being
violating the rule book.
No, he didn't violate the rule book. He violated the code of you don't call another head coach out.
Oh, okay.
You know, because it was a slap in the face to Jim Harbaugh. It was a slap.
Which is why I say this is about more than football.
Yeah, it's about every coach, every other coach, all 31 other coaches went. Did he just call a head coach out? You know, and we would have expected that from Bill Belichick, but Tom Brady. Yeah. So I believe that the Baltimore Ravens and the Indianapolis coach, in some way, said we got to get him for what he did, for the insult he put on us. Well, that's personal. That's real personal. And now I find it so fascinating because now the Ravens head coach and the Baltimore head and the Indianapolis head coach are saying we had nothing to do with this. It's like, you know, You know, and sometimes, you know, it's like Shakespeare says in Hamlet, you know, methinks the lady
Protest
doth protest too much.
All right, so there's no, I can't. We could do this all night. The website for the Mixed Magic Theater, here's an artist who gets the game of football and has played it. You got to go to this website and see some of the work that Ricardo does. He's got some incredible stuff coming up for fall. Please go to the website and see what he's producing. I could talk to him all day, but I'm running out of time. A final word when we come back. Stay with us. All right, so one more thing. I don't know how this whole football thing is going to resolve. All I know is this. If they don't get to it, actually, we had more football conversation than I thought we would. The moral of the story that I brought my guest on for is to talk about, put yourself in a position where you feel like a system has wronged you, and then take a broader look at what those who feel like they're wronged by the system all the time feel. And there's nothing wrong with drawing that kind of common ground. That was kind of my point of this whole thing. In the meantime, a 2-game suspension early in the season is a whole lot easier than a 2 or 4 game suspension late in the season. So sometimes, even though the system isn't working for you, you got to make some smart choices. You know what I mean? You have a great night. Thanks for watching. See you on the radio at noon Monday on WPRO. Bye-bye.